Lena Matthews sat in a circle of folding chairs, the overhead lights in the rehabilitation center casting a sterile glow on the room's pale walls. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking each second of the group therapy session. She shifted uncomfortably, the fabric of her faded jeans rough against her skin, and glanced at the clock for the fourth time in the past 10 minutes. 9 o'clock in the morning, June 15, 2023. Time seemed to crawl in this place. Would you like to share today, Lena? The soft voice of Dr. Karen Roberts, the group facilitator, broke the silence, pulling Lena out of her thoughts. Dr. Roberts, a woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, had a way of coaxing the quietest members into speaking, but Lena wasn't ready, not yet. She managed a weak smile and shook her head. Maybe next time, Lena whispered, her voice barely audible. Lena had been attending these sessions for 3 months, ever since she was discharged from the hospital after the accident. The accident that left her in a coma for 2 weeks and stole 6 months of her life, leaving only scattered fragments in its wake. She remembered waking up in the hospital bed, surrounded by faces she didn't recognize, her mind a blank slate. No matter how hard she tried, her past remained just out of reach, hidden behind a thick fog. The group continued without her. Members shared stories of their own traumas, their voices blending into a dull hum. Lena's eyes drifted to the window, where the summer sun shone brightly, casting long shadows on the linoleum floor. Despite the warmth outside, Lena felt cold inside, as if a part of her had been frozen in time, lost to the darkness of her memory. Across the room, a woman's voice caught Lena's attention. She turned to see Samantha Sam Rivers speaking, her tone steady and clear. Sam was in her early 30s, with auburn hair that fell in waves around her shoulders and green eyes that seemed to see right through people. There was something magnetic about her, something that made Lena feel drawn to her in a way she couldn't explain. I think the hardest part, Sam was saying, is accepting that some things can't be changed, no matter how much we wish they could be. She paused, her eyes meeting Lena's across the room. For a brief moment, Lena felt as if Sam's words were meant for her alone. Lena looked away, a flush creeping up her neck. She didn't know much about Sam, only that she had been coming to the group for almost a year, dealing with her own unspecified trauma. There was an air of mystery around Sam, a sense of something unspoken that intrigued Lena, even as it made her wary. After the session ended, Lena lingered by the coffee station, avoiding the rush of people heading for the door. She poured herself a cup of lukewarm coffee, her hands trembling slightly. She could feel someone watching her, and when she looked up, Sam was standing there, her gaze soft and inviting. "Hey," Sam said, offering a warm smile. "I noticed you haven't been talking much in the sessions. It can be tough, I know. But if you ever want to chat outside the group, I'm here." Lena hesitated, uncertainty swirling in her chest. There was something about Sam that made her feel both comforted and unnerved. But before she could respond, another flash of memory struck her, brief, disjointed images of a man's face, stern and angry, a wedding ring on his hand. Her heart pounded in her chest, the coffee cup slipping from her fingers and clattering to the floor. "Lena?" Sam's voice was filled with concern as she reached out, steadying Lena by the arm. "Are you okay?" Lena nodded quickly, bending down to pick up the cup. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice shaking. "Just a bit clumsy today." But as she stood up, the unease in her stomach only grew stronger. Who was that man in her memory? And why did he make her feel so afraid? "Maybe we could talk sometime," Lena finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I could use a friend right now." Sam's smile widened, a glint of something Lena couldn't quite identify flickering in her eyes. "I'd like that," she said softly. "I'd like that a lot." As they left the center together, the image of the man's face lingered in Lena's mind, a shadow she couldn't shake. And in the depths of her memory, something dark and dangerous waited to be uncovered. Lena Matthews sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the journal in her lap. The soft glow of her bedside lamp barely pierced the gathering dusk outside her apartment window. It was 7:30 in the evening on July 5, 2023. The air was thick with the scent of summer rain, still clinging to her after she hurried back from the cafe where she had met Sam for coffee. The unease that had settled in her chest a month ago was growing stronger, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Most of the pages in Lena's journal were blank, filled only with scattered fragments of memories that made little sense. Tonight, she'd tried to write about her day, but her mind was elsewhere. A vivid image kept flashing through her mind, herself in a white dress, standing on the edge of a cliff, heart pounding with the desperate urge to run. The memory was so real, so intense, that she could almost feel the rough wind tugging at her hair, hear the distant crash of waves below. She closed the journal, her breath quickening. She had no idea where this memory came from or if it was even real, but it left her with a deep sense of dread. Why did this image make her feel so terrified? The sharp trill of her phone broke the silence, making her jump. She reached for it, her hands trembling slightly. It was Sam. "Hey, Lena," Sam's voice came through the line, warm and reassuring. "I've been thinking about our conversation earlier, about those flashes you've been having. Do you want me to come over? We could try to figure it out together." Lena hesitated, biting her lip. She wasn't sure if she was ready to dig into her past, afraid of what she might uncover. But the image of the cliff, the overwhelming fear it brought, made her realize she couldn't face this alone. "Yeah," she replied softly. "I think I need that." By 8:15 in the evening, Sam had arrived, bringing the cool scent of rain with her as she stepped into the apartment. They sat together on the couch, the light from the lamp flickering slightly as the storm outside picked up. With Sam there, Lena felt a strange sense of safety, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. "I've been doing some research," Sam said, pulling out her phone. "I found something online, your marriage certificate. Lena Matthews and Jacob Harrison, dated April 12, 2018. Does that name ring any bells?" Lena's heart skipped a beat. "Jacob Harrison?" She shook her head, the name unfamiliar and distant. I don't remember him. But I feel like I should." Sam nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I also found some old news articles. There was a woman named Emily Hayes who went missing the night before your accident. She was last seen with a man named Jacob Harrison." Lena's breath caught in her throat. The name Emily Hayes sent a shiver down her spine, like a whisper from a distant past. "What happened to her?" "They never found her," Sam replied, her voice low. "But they suspected foul play. Jacob was a person of interest, but the case went cold after he left town. And then, your accident happened." Lena's mind reeled as the pieces of her shattered memory swirled in a chaotic storm. Who was Jacob Harrison? And how was she connected to Emily Hayes? A sudden knock on the door made both women jump. Lena frowned, glancing at Sam. "Were you expecting someone else?" Sam asked, her voice tinged with unease. Lena shook her head, rising to her feet. She crossed the small living room and opened the door, her heart pounding in her chest. The hallway was empty, no one in sight. But there, lying on the welcome mat, was an envelope, the rain already soaking into the paper. She picked it up, her fingers trembling as she tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words scrawled in a hasty, almost frantic hand: "Stop digging into the past, or you'll regret it." Lena's breath hitched as she showed the note to Sam, her mind racing. This wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. Someone didn't want her to remember, and they were willing to do anything to keep the truth buried. As the storm outside raged on, Lena knew she had no choice but to uncover the secrets of her past, no matter how dangerous it might be. Because if she didn't, she might never escape the shadows that haunted her. Lena Matthews woke with a start, her heart pounding against her ribcage. She glanced at the clock on her nightstand, 6:12 in the morning, July 10, 2023. The apartment was silent, save for the distant hum of traffic outside. Her breath came in shallow gasps as fragments of the nightmare clung to her consciousness. She had dreamed of the cliff again, but this time, the man from her flashbacks had a name: Jacob Harrison. It wasn't just a name now. She could see his face clearly, the sharp lines of his jaw, the coldness in his eyes. In the dream, he had been standing behind her, his hand on her shoulder, pushing her closer to the edge. Lena shuddered, the sensation of falling still fresh in her mind. Determined to confront these terrifying memories, Lena knew she couldn't do it alone. By 8:45 in the morning, she was sitting across from Sam in a small booth at a local diner, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. The sunlight streamed through the windows, creating a stark contrast to the darkness that loomed in her mind. "I remembered something," Lena began, her voice trembling. "In my dream, he pushed me. Jacob pushed me off the cliff." Sam leaned forward, her expression serious. "We need to figure out who this guy really is, Lena. And why you don't remember any of this." Lena nodded, the determination hardening in her chest. "I want to go back to where it happened. Maybe it'll help me remember." 9:30 in the morning found them on the road, heading out of the city and toward the rugged coastline where Lena's accident had occurred. The drive was silent, the tension thick between them. Sam kept glancing at Lena, concern etched into her features, but Lena's gaze remained fixed on the passing scenery, her mind racing with fragments of memories she couldn't quite piece together. By 11 o'clock in the morning, they reached the cliffs. The wind whipped around them as they stepped out of the car, the ocean crashing violently against the rocks below. Lena's breath hitched as she took in the sight. The landscape was eerily familiar, the steep drop, the jagged rocks, the endless stretch of water. She could almost hear the distant echo of her own scream. "This is where it happened," Lena whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. She took a tentative step closer to the edge, her heart pounding in her chest. Flashes of that night flickered in her mind, Jacob's voice, cold and menacing, urging her to keep quiet. The feel of his hands on her shoulders, shoving her toward the brink. Sam stood beside her, her hand gently resting on Lena's arm. "Take your time," she said softly. As Lena stared down at the crashing waves, the memories began to surface, slowly at first, then all at once. She had come here with Emily Hayes. Emily had been desperate, terrified, convinced that Jacob was going to kill her. Lena had tried to calm her, to find a way out of the nightmare Jacob had trapped them in. But then Jacob had appeared, his presence as suffocating as the darkness that had surrounded them. He had threatened them, his voice dripping with malice, and when they tried to run, he had chased them to the edge of the cliff. "I remember now," Lena said, her voice trembling. "Emily was with me that night. Jacob, he tried to kill us both." Sam's grip tightened on Lena's arm. "What happened to Emily?" Lena squeezed her eyes shut, fighting back tears. "He caught up to her first. I heard her scream, and then she was gone. I tried to help her, but he grabbed me and," she broke off, her voice choked with emotion. "He pushed me off the cliff. He wanted us both dead." The weight of the revelation hung heavy between them as Lena sank to the ground, the memories crashing over her like the waves below. She had survived, but at what cost? Emily was dead, and Jacob had walked away, leaving her to die as well. But she hadn't died. She had survived, only to forget everything until now. "We have to go to the police," Sam said firmly, pulling Lena back to her feet. "We need to tell them everything." 1:30 in the afternoon, the local police station was a small, nondescript building, a stark contrast to the dark secrets Lena now carried. The detective assigned to their case, Detective Mark Reynolds, was a middle-aged man with a weary expression and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened intently as Lena recounted her memories, his face growing graver with each word. "This is serious," he said, once Lena had finished. "Jacob Harrison was a person of interest in Emily Hayes' disappearance, but we never had enough evidence to charge him. If what you're saying is true, then he's more dangerous than we thought. We need to find him," Lena said, her voice stronger now, fueled by the need for justice. "Before he hurts anyone else." Detective Reynolds nodded. "We'll reopen the investigation, but I need you to be careful. If Jacob knows you've remembered, he might come after you again." As they left the station, the weight of the situation settled heavily on Lena's shoulders. The thought of facing Jacob again was terrifying, but she knew she couldn't back down. Not now. 6:45 in the evening, Lena and Sam returned to Lena's apartment, both exhausted from the day's events. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the room as Lena collapsed onto the couch, her mind racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that Jacob was somewhere out there, lurking in the shadows. I'm scared, Sam, Lena admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. What if he finds us before the police find him? Sam sat down beside her, taking her hand. We're not going to let that happen. We'll stay alert, and we'll be ready. We're going to see this through, Lena. As darkness fell outside, Lena's fear deepened. She could feel the storm brewing, the final confrontation looming on the horizon. The past had been uncovered, but the danger was far from over. Lena knew one thing for certain: this wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about making sure that Jacob Harrison paid for his crimes. And she was ready to face whatever came next, no matter the cost. The darkness outside Lena Matthews' apartment was absolute, the city's usual hum reduced to an eerie silence. 10:45 p.m., July 15, 2023. She stood by the window, staring out at the street below, her breath fogging up the glass. The uneasy quiet of the night made every creak and rustle inside the apartment seem louder, more ominous. A storm was brewing, not just outside, but within her. She knew it was only a matter of time before Jacob Harrison made his move. Sam was in the kitchen, checking the locks for the third time that night. The tension between them had been palpable since they returned from the police station earlier that day. They both knew that Jacob was still out there, watching, waiting. But how close was he? Lena's phone buzzed, breaking the silence. She picked it up with trembling hands. It was a text from an unknown number. It's time to finish what we started. Meet me where it all began. Midnight. Lena's blood ran cold. She knew exactly where Jacob wanted her to go, the cliffs where he had tried to kill her before. 12 a.m., July 16, 2023. Midnight. The very thought of returning to that place made her stomach churn, but she couldn't back down. Not now. He's at the cliffs, Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper as she showed Sam the message. Sam's eyes hardened. We can't go there alone. We need to call Detective Reynolds. Lena shook her head, determination settling in her chest. We don't have time. If we wait, he'll be gone. This ends tonight, Sam. I have to face him. Reluctantly, Sam agreed. They gathered what little they had: a flashlight, Lena's phone, and a sense of desperation, and headed out into the night. The air was heavy with the promise of rain as they drove in silence, the road ahead barely visible through the fog that clung to the coastline. By 11:55 p.m., they had arrived. The cliffs loomed before them, dark and foreboding. The wind whipped through the trees, carrying with it the salty tang of the ocean. Lena's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped out of the car, her flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the thickening mist. He's here, Sam whispered, her voice tense. Be careful, Lena. Together, they made their way to the edge of the cliffs, the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks below growing louder with each step. Lena's hands shook as she gripped the flashlight, the memories of that night flooding back in vivid detail: Jacob's cold eyes, his cruel smile, the sheer terror as she had tumbled into the darkness. And then, she saw him. Jacob Harrison stood at the cliff's edge, his figure barely discernible in the gloom. He turned slowly as they approached, a chilling smile spreading across his face. Lena, he said, his voice smooth and mocking. I knew you'd come. You've always been predictable. Lena's breath caught in her throat, fear and anger swirling inside her. It's over, Jacob. You won't get away with this. Jacob chuckled, taking a step closer to her. Get away with what? There's no one here to stop me, Lena. Just like last time. Sam moved to stand beside Lena, her eyes never leaving Jacob. You're wrong, she said firmly. We're not afraid of you anymore. Jacob's expression darkened. You should be, he hissed, lunging toward Lena with a speed that took her breath away. She stumbled back, barely managing to avoid his grasp as he reached for her. The edge of the cliff was dangerously close now, the ground crumbling beneath her feet. Sam, run! Lena shouted, struggling to keep her balance as Jacob advanced on her again. But Sam didn't move. Instead, she grabbed a large rock from the ground and hurled it at Jacob, striking him in the side. He snarled in pain, momentarily distracted, giving Lena the chance she needed. With a surge of adrenaline, Lena rushed forward, shoving Jacob with all her strength. He teetered on the edge for a moment, his eyes wide with shock, before losing his footing. As he fell backward into the abyss, his scream echoed in the night, swallowed by the roar of the ocean below. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks. Lena collapsed to her knees, trembling as the reality of what had just happened washed over her. It was over. Jacob Harrison was gone. Sam rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around Lena as the first drops of rain began to fall. "It's over, Lena," she whispered, her voice filled with relief. "You're safe now." But as Lena looked out over the cliffs, a strange emptiness settled in her chest. The nightmare was over, but the scars it left behind were deep. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end, just a new beginning she wasn't ready to face. 2:15 a.m., July 16, 2023. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Lena Matthews and Sam returned to Lena's apartment. The dim light of the street lamps filtered through the curtains, casting a muted glow over the small living room. Lena dropped her keys onto the table with a shaky hand, the events of the night playing on a loop in her mind. Jacob Harrison was gone, fallen to his death, but the weight of the confrontation still pressed heavily on her chest. She could feel the remnants of fear, mingled with an overwhelming sense of relief, yet there was something else, something darker, lingering at the edges of her thoughts. Sam sat beside her on the couch, the silence between them filled with unspoken words. "It's over, Lena," she said softly, but the look in her eyes mirrored the unease Lena felt. Lena nodded, but the truth was harder to grasp. 5:30 a.m. crept closer, the faint light of dawn beginning to seep through the curtains, signaling the start of a new day. Yet, for Lena, it felt like she was standing at the edge of another cliff, unsure of what lay beyond. A knock at the door startled them both. Lena's heart raced as she approached cautiously. It was Detective Mark Reynolds, his expression grave but softened by the early morning light. "It's done," he said, stepping inside. "We found Jacob's body. It's officially closed, Lena. You're free." But as the words settled in the air, Lena realized that freedom was more complicated than she'd imagined. The physical threat was gone, but the emotional scars remained, and the memories of what Jacob had done, what she had survived, would take longer to fade. 8 a.m. Lena watched the sunrise from her window, the sky painted in shades of pink and orange. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be therapy sessions, long nights of sleeplessness, and the challenge of rebuilding her life from the ashes Jacob had left behind. Yet, as she turned away from the window, Sam's presence beside her was a reminder that she didn't have to face it alone. They had survived together, and together they would find a way to heal. But even as they embraced the first day of their new lives, a question lingered in Lena's mind, one that would remain unanswered. How do you truly escape the darkness when it's become a part of who you are?